Hey, it's Brooks with Character Design Forge. Since character design is such a broad discipline with really so many different purposes or ways that they can be used, they can be a 3D character in a video game, a 2D mascot that only ever has one pose, I thought we could start a series designing characters for a specific purpose. We'll do a little research on what existing characters in that medium are like, why they're made the way that they are, and then try our hand at one. I want to start with characters from series animation. Of course, there's a ton of different styles and ways that characters are designed in series, but there are a few things that come up more often than not. Part of the reason why I wanted to start here is that there seems to be a lot of animosity or backlash toward the way that these series look, accusations of CalArts style and the like, and I thought we could use some context. For example, a lot of times folks will call a series, like one from Cartoon Network, cheap looking, which might actually be the most astute thing that one could say. If you look at an animated 90-minute feature film with several years of development and a multi-million-dollar budget, yes, the 11-minute cartoon that cost a fraction of that and had a much shorter development time will indeed look cheaper. It has nothing to do with the creators being lazy or cheap in some sort of malicious way, it's just a reality of the production. So from a design perspective, there are a few things that become more often than not truths and problems that need to be solved. Putting a character like Stitch next to a character like Gumball, you'll notice a few things. Gumball is designed to be comprised of simple, flat shapes. The lines that he's made of are not generally going to vary in thickness within the lines. Instead, they're going to be consistent. Some outer lines might be thick, and then inner detail lines will be thin. Characters in series like this are made of flat shapes because it's easier to convince the audience of movement and depth when these pieces move around. When the entire face of a character just moves to the side of their head, it's easier to just drag it toward the edge instead of drawing each individual frame indicating a spherical head turning in space. Many of the characters in series are not necessarily exclusively puppet rigs, but a lot of mouth movements, frequent animations, and the like are all built into rigs, which allow an animator to match the actions the storyboard artist has outlined easily, instead of each individual frame being hand-drawn. Again, drawing is happening within production, but pre-built assets and rigs are expediting that production, perhaps more so than in other 2D animation. I hear a few of you going, aha! So they aren't drawing each frame by hand, so that makes them lazy. Nope, that doesn't even make sense. You're an old world soul, aren't you? In recent times, the work required of the story artist or the storyboard artist, the person who may have only previously drawn an initial version of the script, has gained increasingly more work on their end to the point where they are essentially responsible for a full animatic of the episode, which is basically a video with the story, the timing, and the audio all baked together, all with a very short turnaround time. So these are very hard-working artists, and everyone else in the pipeline isn't exactly resting on their laurels. See, think about the money real quick here. Money moves these productions. You go into a movie theater and pay a ticket price, 90% of which goes back to the studio, then the merchandise and Blu-ray sales and rentals also all go back to the studio. In Disney's case, their feature animations aren't even where they expect to make their money back. They're just hoping that they can make an attraction based off of it in one of their parks in a few years. What does an 11-minute cartoon on a daytime children's television channel get? A few blocks of commercials. Now obviously streaming platforms are changing this, but it makes the average budget for an episode require smart working. When I was teaching a high school class, we actually did all of the math on what it costs to make a few seconds of animation for feature films and a second of animation for Hanna-Barbera's very limited animation series, Huckleberry Hound. And it was a big difference. Series animation has almost always looked cheaper than feature, and you're remembering the shows from your childhood looking better because you were a kid when you watched them, and your taste was worse. Let's go back to the world of Gumball. The characters' designs are also generally flat because the staging and perspective is almost always consistent. The characters don't need to rotate around in 3D space because they are staged like a literal stage play, to play to the audience from a certain angle. These characters are also typically comprised of very simple graphic shapes so that it's easy for us including young children, to understand their actions quickly. Here's a scene from Craig of the Creek. Yes, we see some variation in some of the angles and spacing, but our characters are still staged and seen from essentially the same angles, just used sort of creatively. This makes the need for unique or new drawings or assets per episode low. Usually the budget accounts for a couple of really high quality or detailed shots, like this one of Deltron 3030, which are obviously exciting and maintain interest. Usually, these are comprised of completely new or uniquely drawn frames. The individual elements of a character being separate, iconic shapes makes it easy to freeze part of the character and only animate the mouth, or point with an arm, or keep the legs moving in a walk cycle while the rest of the body is relatively still. If the flat shape of a character moves toward or away from the camera, all that needs to be adjusted is the scale of the object, and the constructed perspective doesn't need as much attention. We don't need to see the individual cylinders in the arm, we just need to see the squares of the arm building toward us. While I don't have exact budgetary details for this, there's of course lots of shows that are more complex than the ones we're using examples of here. While We Bare Bears, Trick Moon, and Big City Greens follow a similar level of complexity to what we've talked about, shows like Infinity Train, Adventure Time, and Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles obviously feature more complicated angles and a lot more uniquely built frame-by-frame animation. These are subsequently usually a bit more expensive. I have to re-emphasize because there's a lot of idealism out there. We have these beautiful, groundbreaking animated projects like Into the Spider-Verse, but you just can't make the same thing sustainably for daytime children's television or a similarly budgeted streaming series. So the creators of these things usually work smarter so that their work can look the best it can in the limitations they have. Animation is hard and time-consuming. They are fulfilling and problem-solving for the purpose of their design, which is the whole point of this new video series, except for Peppa Pig, where they put no thought into it at all. My point is to get away from there being objectively the best character designs. There are objective worst character designs though, again, Peppa Pig, and instead seeing how the function and purpose of character design is important. So with these ideas in mind, let's design our own series limited animation character, and considering the fast-paced nature of series production, I'm gonna give myself about 2 hours to do so. While it may seem like splitting hairs from an outsider's perspective, if you're familiar with my work, you'll know that this style and purpose of character design is not typical to what I usually do. A lot of my characters end up being very dimensional, gestural, illustrated, and round. What we're aiming for with our design here is much more graphical, which means a lot more hard edges and straight lines where possible. Initially, I tried some broad stroke shapes until finally settling on a tortoise design. The nice thing about a frog or turtle is that the facial features are very simple and allow there to be a lot of space for expression and variation without needing to do a ton of extra drawing to achieve it. It's very easy to abstract these creatures. In most of the example clips we used, the line thickness was extremely thin, and while my character here has thicker lines, I tried to give her clean, evenly weighted lines. The nature of the character turnaround here was different than normal too. We wouldn't necessarily see her rotating smoothly in 360 degrees, or hand this off to a 3D modeler. What's more useful instead is to make distinctive looks for the side and front view, so that they're easily recognizable. I don't know if there's anything especially unique about my character here, but the process has been really interesting, and she could at least make for a good background character. I shied away from making any rendering or shading choices except for the gradient green, which is an easy enough texture overlay within the animation process. It wouldn't have to be reanimated constantly the way that a shadow or shading might. I hope that if nothing else, this gave you a better appreciation for the work that goes into series animation. What other mediums and purposes would you like to see in this series of purpose-specific character design videos? 3D game characters, feature animation, toy design, something else? I know that the first in this series is about series animation, and that sounds confusing, but I am genuinely excited for this series of videos going forward. We talk about all of this in depth in my course, Learn Character Design, which I recently rebuilt from the ground up. It's made to help you create characters that people care about, even if you're not confident in your drawing skills yet. If you like my work and want to support me, you can head to patreon.com/bageldenizen, and one of the tiers there is called Biko's Backpack, which is a monthly delivery of new original art in your mailbox. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch at bageldenizen. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.